So I'm going to kind of go over the process. So I'm starting to sand, obviously, the epoxy table that I'm working on, and kind of go through the process of, I guess, start to finish real quick. Kind of run through what I've learned and all the things that need to be done. So got these from a buddy at work. Bought them from him, and hold on, I'm gonna have to set you guys down for a minute. So this is what they started out as. The black walnut, obviously, is what these are, is black walnut slabs. They're about 2 inches thick, about 80 inches long, between 75 80 inches long, about 2 feet wide. 2 feet? Maybe a little over 2 feet wide. Pretty rough. But yeah, you start out with that and you just start sanding. Sand the crap out of it. You sand it. I sanded it all the way down to like 400 grit sandpaper, and that makes it, the more you sand it, the smoother you get it, the more detail that comes out in the bottom. So like, that's one thing I noticed, is like the more time that I put in the finished product with sanding it. So I made one for my brother and sanded on it a lot, and I kind of noticed it with that one. With this one, has a different kind of detailed pocket in it, and I really noticed when I worked on it and really sanded it smooth and worked it from the 2 to the 4 to, you know, 400 grit, and then really worked those areas, it really brought the detail. Almost looked like there was waves in it and stuff, and that stuff really didn't start showing up until you sanded it really good. And so that's one thing I did learn. And so yeah, first process, grab the boards, take them in, sand the crap out of them until they're really smooth. So real quick, I'm going to talk about some things that I've learned about pouring epoxy tables. So they are super time consuming, take a long time to do. The first one I did was for my brother, like I said earlier, and it was for his wedding present. And I think, what'd that take us, Dad? 6 months?
Well, maybe closer to a year.
Yeah, took a long time, needless to say, but learned a lot on it. The next thing I'll talk to you about is how you get the table to release from the mold. So they make this stuff called mold release. The first table I did the melamine plywood and used the mold release spray. And you spray it on once, let it sit 5 minutes, then spray it on again and brush it in or something like that. And then you put the epoxy in and then you go. Table did not come out of that mold very well. So then they actually make this mold release tape. This is what it's called. And so what I did with this stuff is you put this mold release tape in the inside, and then right before we poured, we sprayed the mold release spray right onto it. And so this stuff is pretty cool. So we lined the whole inside with this and then sprayed the mold release spray on it and then poured it in. Obviously we don't know how it's going to come out yet, but we're really hopeful that it will. So the first time I did the deep pour, I didn't seal the boards. And so I'd heard a lot of things about air bubbles and how it's a nightmare and this and that. I didn't really believe it. And so then I built the mold. So what you saw, the table's in is melamine plywood. I think it's like 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch thick, screwed together, caulked together. It's basically just enough, you know, about 1/2 inch on the outsides of the table for enough epoxy to get between the board and the outer edge, so that the actual table edge is epoxy, not wood, is kind of what I was shooting for. So when I put the boards in and then poured the epoxy in, we probably mixed, I think we mixed 3 gallons and then poured it in. The first time I did it, didn't have the boards tied down, nothing, poured it in, boards start floating. First thing that happened, so shoot. So then we start putting weights on the boards, trying to hold the boards down. And then once that got done and we got the epoxy up to the level we wanted it, because we had to mix more and put more in, because obviously, you know, it takes a lot of epoxy. This table is going to take 9 gallons just in the deep pour section, just to put it into perspective. And it's $300 for 3 gallons. So it's not really a cheap project, but it turns out super good, right? So we got it all poured out, and then all of a sudden, let there be air. Air bubbles popping out everywhere. Nothing I could do. I was you know, using the heat gun and everything I could do to get all the air bubbles out, but they just kept coming back. And that was a fight all the way up through the top coat of the table. And so learned a very, very huge lesson with that, and that is to seal your boards before you deep pour. And so that was some advice that I'd like to give you guys about that. So when I say seal the boards, I mean mix up epoxy and apply it onto the boards, let it dry, and then repeat the process. I think I did it on these ones 3 times. You basically keep resealing them till they quit taking epoxy and stop air bubbling. Now, in between your layers of epoxy, you have to sand the surface. We usually use like a 220 sandpaper. We'll sand everything at 220, and that's plenty fine to put more epoxy on and not see any scuff marks. Like, you can get away with quite a bit when you're stacking epoxy on top of each other, in my opinion. Once sanded, you then take an air nozzle, blow it off, and then we take rubbing alcohol, 99%, and put it onto a microfiber towel, and then just wipe everything down once or twice until, you know, basically that the towel's clean. And then next thing is like what I use for epoxy. So this is what I use. Like I said, deep pour, and so it's liquid glass. It's obviously a 2-part, right? So there's 2 A's and 1 B, so it's like 2, so doubled out of that. And this stuff takes a long time. It takes like a full day to even get close to getting hard. Like realistically, maybe even over that. And then this stuff, the super clear, is what I do for the tabletop. So I'll pour the deep stuff right up to the top of the table, and then I'll switch to the other type of epoxy for the table surface, because it's actually a food grade epoxy. And so on this table, we sealed the boards, and then poured the deep pour, and then no air bubbles. This one's turning out really, really good. The next thing is pearlescence. Pearlescence is kind of difficult because it's all about timing. So when you first pour your deep pour epoxy, it's obviously, like I said, it takes 24 hours for it to fully cure. When I did my first table, I put it in maybe an hour after I poured it, and the pearlescence just fell to the bottom. So then I mixed more and put some more on it, and it still fell because, you know, I didn't wait that long to put more on it. So with this table, I waited 6 hours before I put the pearlescence in, and it was perfect. I don't know why I just guessed 6, I just did. And so what the pearlescence looks like, it's literally like powder, right? And then you mix it in to your epoxy, or like a little bit of epoxy is what I did, and then pulled it up into a syringe, and then you squirt it along the edges, and then you take a little stick and you swirl it, kind of put a pattern. You can put patterns in it, you can do whatever you want, and then you can color it. So like this stuff, there's a bunch of cheap, this stuff is like a more cheap color, and so it takes a lot of color of this stuff to make the epoxy change. And so I found this other color. It's called epoxy rugging pigment, and this stuff is super thick and changes the colors super fast. It's like literally I mixed 3 gallons and took 2 sticks. I don't even know what to call it, like 2 big like skewer sticks, maybe? Skewer sticks, well, that's what we'll call them. Full of this, just dipped them in, got as much on there as I could, wiped it in the bucket, did another one, wiped it in the bucket, mixed it, and it was like super dark. Kind of hard to tell how dark it is unless you have a clear bucket or a lot of light to go through it, but still did it that way.
Okay, go find the door. Here, let's do it like I did the other day.
How was that?
Spread it out here.
Okay.
So you can back up a little more, can you? Okay, let me slide this table out of the way a little further.
Grab the world. Move the world. Okay, what we're doing is we're setting up obviously a pop-up tent that we have converted into kind of what looks like kind of a paint booth, I guess you could call it. And let me get you guys a little better adjusted. Is that better? What do you guys think? Yeah? A little higher maybe. Maybe that's good, huh? All right. Kind of like a paint booth. We use this so we keep the shop to around 60, and then we bring up the temperature inside this closer to 80. So this kind of helps us make it so we don't have to use so much heat to keep the table at the temperature it has to be. And that temperature is between what? What is it? 75 and 80 or something like that?
70 to 85.
70 to 85. So it has to be pretty warm. And this shop isn't insulated, so it's hard to keep warm. So that's how we get away with it. It doesn't come out very easy.
It isn't. I think we need to go
What did we buy at Harbor Freight or something?
pull the corner.
There you are. Then of course the other reason that we have this is for dust and other things, flies, mosquitoes. Never fails whenever you have something that you don't want to get anything in. As soon as you pour it, everything gets in it. So this is a great way to also keep that separate, and that's worked very good for us so far. Ah! I dropped you. Welcome back. Need to get a little more wet, or is it all right?
I think this is dust freeze or a dust pickup type. I think it'll be okay. You can see the screen anymore. Pour it down each slab, down the middle. This is the bubbling you want to try to prevent, and this happens because there's a natural crack clear through the wood. If you get those when you get a chance, it'll really show the folks what you're doing.